Hey everybody, it's Pastor John with your Midweek Moment for this week. I had just a sort of an odd thing happen to me this morning. I'm driving up to work the way I do when I drive to work. And I had a story pop into my head. It was a story that I'd read, in Car and Driver magazine, maybe 25, 30 years ago. No, longer than that, maybe closer to 40 to 45 years ago now that I think about it. It was a story about a company called PACCAR Incorporated. You've probably never heard of PACCAR Incorporated, but you've heard of what they make, because PACCAR Incorporated is the company that makes Kenworth and Peterbilt trucks, which according to this article, which I read a gazillion years ago, have a reputation for being sort of the Rolls-Royce and Bentley of heavy-duty commercial trucks. And what happened in the article is that Car and Driver sent one of their writers out to the PACCAR factory, and he took a tour of it, and he saw a Kenworth truck actually being built. And one of the stories that the guy tells in the article is the story of them painting the cab of a Kenworth truck. And PACCAR apparently will paint your truck any color you want, or with any design you want. They apparently have guys out there who can just paint just about anything on the side of a truck. And what the person who had ordered this truck wanted was he wanted a red cab with white and black stripes. So what most companies would do, of course, is they would paint the whole cab red, and then they would mask off all of the cab except for the places where the stripes were going to be, and then they would paint the stripes. But what PACCAR did was they did the whole thing in reverse. First they masked off the entire truck, and they just painted the black line. And that was it. That was all they did for the day. Because the paint had to set and it had to cure. And then the next day, once the paint had cured, they came back, they remasked the truck, and they painted the white stripe. And that was all they did for that day. And then they came back the next day and they masked off the stripes and they painted the rest of the cab, which was the exact opposite of what everybody else does. And the writer was simply astounded by this. And when he asked why they did it that way, the guy who was leading him on the tour said they did it that way because the paint stripes wouldn't chip. Because what happens is when you put automotive paint on top of automotive paint, it sticks, but not as well as it does if it sticks to metal. That's really what it's designed to stick to. So to make sure that those paint stripes will never chip, when the driver's on the road, they paint the stripes and then they paint the rest of the truck. And that is an example of doing a good job, which reminded me, of course, of the old adage that any job worth doing is worth doing well. And of course, at one point or another, we all realize that in life that's not actually true. There are some jobs that you don't really have to do well, you just have to do them. For example, taking out the garbage. You don't have to really worry about doing a great job of taking out the garbage. You just put the garbage in the bag, you put the bag in the can, you put the can out at the curb, and that's really all there is to it. In the same way, feeding the dog. Nobody worries about feeding the dog well. You just put the food in the bowl and the dog eats it, he gives you a happy wag of his tail, and everybody goes home happy. It's just that simple. So there are a lot of things like that, sort of the routine, ordinary jobs of life that you don't have to worry about how good a job you do at them. You just have to get them done. There are, however, some sort of routine everything days, or every week at least, things that we do that you really should be concerned with how you do them. I was cutting the grass at the parsonage yesterday. That's a job you should worry about doing well. You want to make sure you get into all the corners. You want to make sure you get under the bushes. You want to make sure that once you're done mowing, you get out the trimmer and you trim around the hedges and around the sidewalks and all that sort of stuff, because the job just looks better when you do it right. You can't just randomly, I suppose, run a lawnmower around your yard, but you're going to miss spots and there are going to be things that aren't trimmed, and it just doesn't look as good. That's a job that you really should take the time to do well. If you're a baker, baking bread, that is certainly the sort of thing that you should take the time to do well, because there are a whole bunch of complex chemical reactions that have to take place to make bread. And if you don't do it just right, if you don't have the right ingredients, if the water's not the right temperature, all that sort of stuff, your recipe just doesn't work. So that's a job that you should take the time to do well. And another thing that we do every day that we should really take the time to do well are our relationships with other people. And the thing of it is, while we should take the time to do our relationships well, we don't always. Not because we're mean to people, not because we dislike people, not because we do terrible things to them, but just because sometimes we have a tendency to take the people in our lives, well, just sort of for granted, I suppose, because they're always there. If you're living in a family, you've got your spouse, you've got your kids, they're always there. They're every single day. If you have relationships at work, you see those folks 5 days a week. Sometimes you can just take them for granted because they're always there. The same thing can happen here in church. If you're here in church every week, you tend to see the same people every week. And while it's nice to see them, there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe you don't invest the same amount of time in visiting with the folks here at church as you did at one point. And maybe that's just a sign that you're taking them just a little bit for granted. It's something we all do. It's something I do. I'm certainly not saying that I'm not the person who never does this, because I do this all the time. In fact, I may in some ways be worse at this even than most people, because I'm the sort of person who, when you're right in front of me, I am an absolutely terrific friend. But when you're not right in front of me, well, I just tend to take you for granted. And that's something I'd like to do something about. I would like to be better at relationships. I would like my relationships with other people to do the sort of thing that I really do well. In fact, I think the world would probably be a better place overall if we spent more time on our relationships. If we took the time and we made the effort to do our relationships really, really well. So let me leave you with that thought today. What are the, let's say, 2 or 3 most important relationships that you have in your life? And what can you do to invest in those relationships to make sure that you do those relationships really, really well? Thanks.